All right. So I'm recording on my computer speakers. I don't have my headphones in or anything, so hopefully the audio and other quality is good. Uh, if there is background noise, it's my neighbors or whatever. So hopefully the audio is okay and everything works. So, welcome to episode 4 of the podcast Ghosts, Demons, and Murder. Oh my. My name is Hayden Crook, and I will be your host for today's episode on the true crime cases of Kris Jake Moon and Pauline Brazeau. I'm going to attach an explicit label to today's episode because of the themes discussed. I will also attach a trigger warning due to the violence and abuse, which will be discussed as well. If you cannot handle this topic or theme, then please avoid today's episode. I don't want you to get triggered or have any issues or anything. So if you don't think you can handle this topic for today, then please just skip this episode and tune in next week. Or go back, if you're new, go back and listen to another episode I already recorded. Before we officially dive into today's episode, I just wanted to bring to light the horrific situation that Native American peoples are facing today. And this summary comes from the website Native Women's Wilderness. Are women, girls, and two spirits? If you don't know what that is, that's Native American people who identify in the LGBTQ plus community. They're being taken from us in an alarming way. As of 2016, the National Crime Information Center has reported 5,712 cases of missing American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls. Strikingly, the U.S. Department of Justice Missing Persons Database has only reported 116 cases. The majority of these murders are committed by non-native people on native-owned land. The lack of communication combined with jurisdictional issues between state, local, federal, and tribal law enforcement make it nearly impossible to begin the investigative process. Just a side note, side piece, if you haven't seen the movie Wind River, I would highly recommend it. My in-laws told me about it. I watched it. It's about murdered and missing Indigenous women in Wyoming. I believe it's a true story. It's very sad. It's going to be kind of what we're going to like some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, but I recommend it if you're interested in this topic and this subject and want to help and get involved. And then my little bit after that summary was Native Americans are being murdered, raped, kidnapped, and trafficked at an alarming rate. Updated statistics are hard to find because of the COVID era and lack of records. This is a devastating topic to discuss, but it is important so that their silenced voices are heard. So the first case that we're going to talk about is Kris Jake Moon. My source is ABC 15. That's a local Arizona news station. It says the Native American mother was found dead on February 13th, 1998, on the Arizona-Nevada border. Through working with the Mojave County Sheriff's Office, ABC 15 reporter Ashley Paredes was able to obtain never-before-seen surveillance video of the last moments she was seen alive. We also spoke exclusively with family members who still, after 25 years, are continuing to advocate for justice. We just want people to acknowledge that, she was this beautiful light in the world and she was taken from us in a very, very violent manner, said Nikki Borchardt Campbell, Kris's niece. Kris was found by a man and his daughter on February 16th, 1998, in a brushy part of the desert off Old Highway 91 between Littlefield, Arizona, and Mesquite, Nevada. They had been looking for firewood when they came across her body covered with a blue blanket. The men filed a report in Mesquite before the case was turned over to the Mojave County Sheriff's Office. Investigators say Kris had died a very violent death, apparent from evidence at the scene and her appearance. Her family found out shortly after, now 25 years later, they are holding on to memories. My Aunt Kris was a very strong and proud Indigenous woman. Some of my first memories was definitely looking up to her because, she was older than me, and at one point had been the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah queen, said Nikki. Surveillance video shows Kris with cousins and friends at the Oasis Casino the night before. It was a popular Saturday night hangout spot for gambling and drinks. It was there that they ended up meeting two Mexican nationals. Investigators said at one point Kris was escorted out of the casino by security because of an argument. She was seen leaving with one man wearing a cowboy hat, and investigators say that is the man they are still looking for. A witness who was with Kris's group that night was interviewed, saying he had worked with the man but only knew his first name. He told investigators they had taken two separate cabs to the State Line Casino after being kicked out of the Oasis. They apparently didn't have any money after being dropped off and again were asked to leave. The witness said they ended up at the Virgin River Casino but couldn't remember who was with them at the time. The last thing he said he remembered was leaving Kris in a back booth of a restaurant there so she could call her family for a ride. There was a phone call made that night. My other aunt, Antonia, received a phone call. It was just her saying, "Hey, I'm in Mesquite. If you can you come pick me up?" And so I know that she has deep regrets from that night, said Tammy Borchardt Slayton, Kris's other niece. So, quick side note, I looked up the casinos on Google, did some research. The Oasis Casino was demolished in 2013, but the old address states that it was 1.5 miles from the State Line Casino. And then the State Line Casino and the Virgin River Casino are located near the Nevada Arizona border and are close to Utah as well. So kind of like the Four Corners area type of idea if you're familiar with that. The Virgin River Casino is 2.3 miles from the State Line Casino, and Kris Moon's body was found 8.7 miles from the Virgin River Casino. And I did some background into the Oasis Casino because I just thought it was interesting that I couldn't really find anything about it on Google Maps, and then I found out, it was demolished, but I looked into it and there was some sketchy stuff about it. It was a very kind of a sketchy place. There are some incidences that were reported that are kind of tied to the casino before it got demolished. On March 10th, 1996, Butch Laswell, a stunt performer from nearby Logandale, died while performing a televised motorcycle stunt on a pedestrian bridge connected to the Oasis. The resort paid $100,000 to set up the stunt, which attracted 23,000 spectators. In July 2000, an 8-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by a Utah man who lured her away from the resort's Family Fun Center arcade. The girl's family sued the Oasis for a lack of adequate security in February 2001, seeking $5 million in punitive damages. And then on the night of May 13th, 2005, the Oasis was partially evacuated when a Utah man began firing gunshots inside a hotel room after a 2-hour standoff and several unsuccessful attempts to contact the man. Police entered the room and found that the man had shot and killed himself. So yeah, that casino was kind of sketchy. Sounds like had some issues. So there was just a little bit of a side note, some background about mileage, location, and stuff of the casinos and other stuff. This article continues. The witness also confirmed the man last seen with Kris never came back to work the next day and never picked up his paycheck. A lot of time passed before the Mojave County Sheriff's Office was able to dedicate an investigator solely to this case. It's something the family is saddened by. It's important for us to remember, but it's also important for other individuals to know that there are people out there that have the same type of stories that have had issues for law enforcement on and off the reservation. It's not just an isolated event, said Tammy. Now, Lori Miller, an investigator with the Mojave County Sheriff's Office, is doing all she can to solve this case. She wasn't with the department when the crime occurred, but this case means a lot to her. She is someone. She does have a name. Somebody knew her. Somebody saw her that night. Somebody saw where she went and who she went with. We just need that person after all these years to come forward because, I mean, her family deserves it, said Investigator Miller. If you have any information on this case, you're asked to contact the Mojave County Sheriff's Office at 928-753-0753, extension 4408. And then the other source, that was Arizona. So the other side, my other source comes from KSNV News 3, Las Vegas. It's my second source for this case. Las Vegas. Investigators in Arizona are seeking the public's help in locating 4 people possibly connected to the death of a Utah woman who was last seen in Mesquite in 1998. According to the Mojave County Sheriff's Office Special Investigations Unit, Kris Jake Moon of Cedar City was last seen on Friday, February 13th, 1998, at the Oasis Casino in Mesquite. Her body was later found in a bush east of Highway 91, Big Bend area, near milepost 4.4 on February 16th. An autopsy later revealed her cause of death to be blunt force trauma. And if, side note, real quick, if you look into a lot of these missing and murdered Indigenous women cases, it's a lot of blunt force trauma, a lot of abuse. There have been police reports and concerns and stuff, and nothing's done. It's kind of just brushed aside, or they come and do just a quick wellness check, and everything seems okay, so they don't really look into it more. But that's a lot. A lot of it are violent deaths for these missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is sad. Detectives are also looking for Daryl Calvin Dry Jr. and Rosalia Bushhead for questioning regarding the incident. They are the 2 identified people seen leaving the casino with the victim. And there's no updates, no anything. So I wonder if detectives or people even did reach out to them or were able to locate them. I don't really know. It's very interesting. And this case in particular, I'm not making excuses. It just seems kind of difficult because it's like, Kris Jake Moon was from Utah, killed in Nevada, and then just it was close to Arizona. It just seems like it said at the beginning, like communication is kind of tough between departments, and it's just an unfortunate case. I did try to reach out to this page, but they never replied. It's a Facebook page post from September 18th, 2021. It says public supporters. We, as the co-chairs of the Kris Jake Moon Missing Murdered Indigenous Women campaign, son and daughter, are announcing that we are suspending our efforts to reopening her cold case out of Arizona, Mojave County. We found that it is no longer in our best interest of our family at this time, but maybe we will try later in the future. The page will remain up. We will continue to keep her legacy alive within us. Without catching any leads, the MC will most likely will not reopen it. We've came to peace with this, but we just hope things would have been different. However, we haven't given up, but there's only so much we can do. We do appreciate all those whom supported us. Keep her name out there. We'll have a grazing period before we make an official signed statement sent to all agencies involved as soon as we get things tied up. Thanks. Wade Jake Moon and Shaughnessy. Those were her children, Kris Jake Moon's children. And unfortunately, that's the end of that case. Hopefully, they can find out who did it. I mean, it sounds like they have some leads. I don't know why it's not being kind of prioritized, but it's an unfortunate incident that happened, and I really hope that the family gets some closure from this. Okay. The next case is Pauline Brazeau. I initially found this case from a Reddit post posted by the 11th Toe 25. And their article about this, their Reddit post about this next case said, charges laid by RCMP in 47-year-old Alberta cold case murder of Pauline Brazeau. Pauline Brazeau, a Metis 16-year-old single mother, moved from Saskatchewan to Calgary in 1975 with her young daughter. On January 8th, 1976, she was spending time with her family at her aunt's apartment in the west end of Calgary. Around 2:30 in the morning, Pauline and one of her friends left the apartment to go get a snack at a nearby restaurant. They both left the restaurant together after finishing their meal, but Pauline misplaced her gloves and went back to the restaurant alone to see if she left them there. It's unfortunately not known exactly what happened to her after this, but she did not meet back up with her friend after returning to retrieve her gloves. She was last seen leaving the restaurant alone again at around 3 a.m. Only a few hours later, her body was found near a remote forestry road west of Calgary near Cochrane. The young mother had been stabbed multiple times and her death was confirmed to be a homicide. Unfortunately, the case went cold over the years with little information available to investigators as to who would want to hurt Pauline or why. Very little information was ever released to the public about possible suspects or motives in the murder. In 2014, Pauline's father told CBC it had been 20 years since he had heard any updates on her case from the RCMP. In 2021, however, the case was given a fresh look by investigators from both Calgary Police and the RCMP due to advancements in DNA technology. That fresh look finally paid off. On Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, RCMP charged 73-year-old Ronald James Edwards of Sunder, Alberta, with non capital murder, the definition that was being used in the Canadian criminal or homicide at the time of Pauline's death. Investigators say they do not believe the suspect and victim knew each other. RCMP stated that investigative genetic genealogy helped them to close in on their suspect. The case was complex and not only involved a private DNA lab in the United States, but also two investigative genetic genealogists who worked with RCMP and the Calgary police to find the killer. Inspector Brianne Brown of the RCMP's Serious Crimes Branch had this to say on the case. The Alberta RCMP Historical Homicide Unit investigators are committed to speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. The search for Pauline's killer has never ended over the past 47 years. This was a well-known case in Alberta, and I'm glad Pauline's loved ones finally can have some closure and will be able to face the accused in court after so many years. Rural Alberta has a fair amount of cold cases, particularly of Indigenous women, and hopefully this case can invigorate investigators to take a new look at some other unsolved murders as well. Pauline's family are said to be shocked at charges laid after so many years, but now they have answers after losing their loved one in such a senseless and tragic crime. Source 5 is CBC News, which is like a Canadian news company. Says it's been 38 years since Pauline was killed, and about 20 years since her father last heard from an officer about his daughter's case. Pauline's mother has since died. According to Nancy, Pauline was outgoing, friendly, and just a normal kid. Cousin Roy said she was stunning. She was a beautiful girl, boy. Oh, she was a wonderful looking girl, he said. Pauline grew up in a small house in Yorkton with 8 other people, her parents, her siblings, and 2 cousins her parents took in when her aunt died. Just kind of grew up that way. You have to share a bed, so that's what we did. Those are the good memories, I guess, that I have of my sister, said Nancy. Neither her father nor her sister is disappointed in the police work. They know a lot of time has passed, and they believe the police did everything they could do at the time, or they could at the time. As for a national inquiry, her father isn't sure, neither is Nancy. I don't know what would actually come out of it. What good could come out of that? I can't bring that person back, and if the police haven't found him, I don't know if Pauline's case could be included, she said. Nancy said she understands why other families want an inquiry, and she feels grateful her sister's body was found. I guess for me that's closure, said Nancy. Even though it's 38 years ago, it's just something that shouldn't have happened. And my final source for this episode is from Lethbridge News Now. On November 7th, 2023, Ronald James Edwards of Sunder was arrested. The murder charge against him is as it was defined in the Criminal Code in 1976. At that time, Canadian law declared murder to fall under 2 categories, capital and non-capital. His charges for non-capital murder. Edwards has been remanded and is to appear in court again November 14th. Okay, side note on this, I went and did some research, got an update. So basically, Ronald James Edwards will have to appear in a higher Canadian court on November 14th, which obviously I'm recording this episode about a week or so after that, which means it recently happened. I did find an updated article about the case from the Calgary Herald, which is a newspaper in Canada, and it was disappointing. It was not satisfactory. It was not what I wanted to hear. So they reported that, but Edward's lawyer, Powell Milserek, said he needs more disclosure of evidence, and this case was set over to December 5th. So this piece of shit just gets to have his court cases dragged out. I don't know why his lawyer is saying more evidence when there's literally blood work, like the DNA, like that team they brought in a bunch of people, outside agencies. Like, I mean, they're not, it's DNA, it's blood, whatever, it's right there. So this asshole gets to just have the court case dragged out, even though he is obviously guilty. So that just kind of makes me mad. And I know, and the family was upset too with this. Like, why do they keep dragging it out? Like, they have pretty good evidence. This happened like so long ago. Like, I think it said 47 years ago. And now it's just all, it's like reopening an old wound for them pretty much. So I hope that justice is served soon and the family of Pauline Brazeau can have some peace and closure. So that's it for today's episode. Um, Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Ghosts, Demons, and Murder. Oh my! I will be including some resources and information on murdered and missing Indigenous women in the podcast notes for you to look at and just research and stuff. It's very interesting, the ways we can help and make sure that these individual stories are told and that their death isn't the end of it. They're not silenced. Next time we will be discussing the peculiar case of Brenda Heist. It's going to be a little bit of like true crime. Um, don't want to give too much away. Just it's an interesting case. Like it's true crime in a sense, but there's no murder or death necessarily. I'm not going to give too much away. That's just what I'm going to talk about next time. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.